Hi, this is John Hall, and welcome to a bonus episode. For the last several months, the All About Beer podcast has been producing great episodes on a single topic that matter to beer drinkers. The hosts, Don Tess and M. Sauter, have great expert guests that bring unparalleled insight into all of the aspects of beer. On this episode that you're about to hear, it tackles the importance of clean draft lines. And even if you're a casual drinker, this is still important and fascinating. You can hear regular episodes of the All About Beer podcast, as well as Brewer to Brewer and Beer Travelers by searching All About Beer on your podcast platform of choice. And if you believe in quality journalism and content, I hope you'll give our Patreon a look. That's patreon.com/allaboutbeer. Or you can learn more about advertising on the shows by emailing info@allaboutbeer.com. I'll be back next week with a brand new episode of Drink Beer, Think Beer. But for now, please enjoy the All About Beer podcast with M. Sauter and Don Tess.
I'm M. Sauter, better known as Pints and Panels.
And I'm Don Tess, better known as the Don of Beer.
Welcome to the 12th episode of the All About Beer podcast. Every 2 weeks, we talk with leading experts and take a deep dive into one topic of beer. Visit allaboutbeer.com and follow us on social media at allaboutbeer. And why not visit our Patreon, patreon.com/allaboutbeer to support this show and others. This week on the show, we're going to be talking about draft lines, draft cleaning, and why draft beer lines are super important. You should be cleaning your goddamn draft lines. God damn it. I never swear on this show, but man, clean your lines. And I got
You're
super
losing
squeaky.
your voice.
I
You're
lose
so
my
excited
voice.
about
I'm
this.
like a squeaky boy. Our guest this week is the fabulous Neil Whitty of Craft Quality Solutions. And I'm so excited to be able to talk to him because, one, he's a master cicerone. He owns his own draft business. He helped write the draft beer quality manual. Like, he's the draft guy. Man, and again, there's nothing more important in the beer world, and that's also incredibly misunderstood, incredibly technical, but incredibly important as clean draft lines. Don, you've had bad draft beer before, and how did it make you feel? It made you feel sad, right?
It made me feel sad. I just, everybody knows I like a good joke. So I just want to say that Neil Whitty is the first overall draft pick. Come on, give it.
I want that. Normally your jokes don't make me laugh, but that was a good one, and I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
But yeah, it's incredibly important, draft cleaning, draft lines. Like, when you get a bad draft beer, it makes you sad. It can set your whole day or night or whatever. It can make you second guess what you're tasting. It can make you second guess the brewery. It can make you second guess what you're drinking. It's just overall an incredibly important thing. So I'm really, really excited to be able to talk to Neil today about why this matters.
Yeah, me too. Like you say, I've also had bad beer experiences through draft lines, and it's something I actually don't know a lot about. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what Neil has to say, and then becoming a better consumer, because we can all be better consumers.
Neil Whitty is a 26-year veteran of the beer business. He's the Associate Director of Exams for the Cicerone Certification Program and runs Craft Quality Solutions, his consulting and draft beer services. Neil is a longtime judge at the Great American Beer Festival and at the World Beer Cup. He is certified through BJCP and is one of only 22 Master Cicerones. He is also the original member of the Brewers Association Draft Beer Quality Subcommittee and is the co-author of the Draft Beer Quality Manual. Welcome to the show, Neil.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So can you give people a background of your knowledge with draft quality?
Well, it goes back quite a ways to my early years with Boulevard Brewing Company. I worked with Boulevard Brewing Company for 19 years, starting in 97. And, originally I started as a brewer. And after about 3 years in that role, John McDonald, the founder of the company and president at the time, created a new role of a field quality manager, someone who would go out in the marketplace and make sure that all the beer that we made at the brewery tasted good out in the marketplace. And it was kind of a unique role at the time in a brewery I think New Belgium was the only other brewery in the, in the craft beer category, so to speak, that was doing something similar. And so I was given the mandate to go out and make sure our beer tasted good out at retail. And, when you get out there and really start looking at where most of the quality issues pop up, it comes up with draft beer. And they gave me the mandate pretty much, learn as much about draft beer as you can and become an expert on it. And they gave me a lot of leeway to learn and, get my hands dirty, start doing draft installation on behalf of the brewery, because there were a lot of badly designed systems out there. We found we could put in a better system and improve quality that way. So they let me, do a lot of that and do a lot of experimentation and playing around at the brewery with different stuff. And that's really where it all began. And I did that work for 16 years for them. And then when I left, which is, I guess, been 6 years ago now, I've kind of continued that work. So it's been kind of a long journey.
Cool.
And yeah, and you also, so now what you do is you have your own company, and then you also work for Cicerone. You also work for, because you had a hand in doing the draft beer quality manual, which is not a beach read, but essential reading, in my opinion, for anyone who owns a bar or a brewery, or in general. I mean, it's a little technical. But yeah, you got you're the, when I think of draft beer, I think of you, Neil, because you're the guy.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I've kind of built a lot of my career around my draft beer knowledge and expertise. And, that's become a large part of what I'm known for in the business. Part of that is, due to my participation in the draft beer quality manual and the writing of that book, as you mentioned. We started that process in 97, in 2007. It was shortly after the Brewers Association was formed. But before that, it was the Association of Brewers, and then they merged with the old Brewers Association of America, because there were a lot of overlapping agendas. And when they came together, they formed the technical committee of the Brewers Association to deal with technical issues. And a subcommittee of that was draft beer quality. And that was one of the very first things that the technical committee took on. And so I was part of that committee from its inception. And, our first task was to put our heads together and speak with one voice as an industry. We, very quickly got on board with the help of Ken Grossman, who's a pretty influential dude. We got the big brewers on board. So we had AB, Miller, Coors. This was pre-joint venture, pre-InBev days. And, so there were about 20 to 25 of us that put our heads together over the course of a few years and wrote that first version of the manual. I still am part of that group today. It's hard to believe it's been as long as it has been. We're, I guess, in our 16th year, as crazy as it sounds, version 4 of the manual at this point. But we still meet and talk about draft quality and do our workshop every year. We've got one coming up at CBC this year again. So yeah, I mean, that was a big part of, that played a big role in, me kind of getting my name out there, as far as, being someone who's thought about in those terms, like you mentioned. And, right now, like you say, I have my own business. It's called Craft Quality Solutions. I do all kinds of consulting work in the business mainly around quality in the marketplace. Anything from, doing detailed work with distributors to help improve their draft quality teams and improve their, draft system maintenance. I do consulting with retailers on quality issues, front of house service, back of house, design issues with systems. I do draft system installation. I have some pet accounts here in Kansas City where I live, where I actually do just some nitty-gritty troubleshooting and stuff like that. It's kind of a catch-all business that deals with anything and everything, beer quality, draft beer quality. And that's in addition to the work I do with Cicerone certification program. I'm an exam manager and training manager for them.
And a master cicerone.
Yes, and I'm a master cicerone. I passed that exam in 2012.
Which would make you what number, master cicerone?
Well, my certificate says I was the sixth one.
Okay, cool.
There are 22 of them now.
Awesome. Congratulations. I don't want to deviate from our main topic, but I wanted to congratulate you because that is significant. So,
well, thank you. It's been, it's been over 10 years now, but I appreciate the congratulations anyway. Yeah, it's been quite a while. It's been quite a journey with the whole Cicerone thing as well.
You mentioned that, you install systems now, and that, and prior, when you got into this, there was, really bad system. Like, what makes a good system?
Well, there are a few key areas where people can really screw up a draft system. When I first got into draft beer, one of the reasons that the field quality position was created at Boulevard in the early 2000s to begin with was that there was a huge proliferation of air compressors pushing draft beer as a means of gas dispense, which is, if you know anything about beer, oxygen is an enemy of beer. And the thought of pumping oxygen into a keg to dispense it is just absolutely horrifying. If you've ever had a beer on draft that's been dispensed with compressed air, it's terrible. It ruins the flavor in about a day. Think about your the backyard barbecue where you got the keg of beer and the hand pump. Have you ever had that beer the next day after you've pumped that thing full of air? It's disgusting. And, it's because it's lost all the gas. The compressed air doesn't keep it carbonated. And it's just simply oxidized. It just tastes like, wet paper or cardboard. It's really gross. And that happens at retail when you use compressed air. And back in the day, those were all over the place. There were some markets that were particularly bad, but they were all over. It was, I would say probably 25 to, 30% of all of the long draw systems were compressed air, if not more. And that was kind of my first task, was to clean a lot of that stuff up. But, moving on, once we got a lot of that stuff cleaned up, we were able to turn our attention to some of the other issues that were pretty commonplace as well. One of them was using just a bad generation of beer tubing. There's been a lot of advances over the past 25 years in the quality of draft line tubing. Nowadays, the standard is this kind of squishy thing we call barrier tubing, which is resistant to biological buildup because it has a very smooth surface on the interior of the line. It also is relatively impervious to gas, so the beer doesn't go flat inside the lines. 25 years ago, if you went to a bar that had a long draw system, they would pour all the beer out of the line at the beginning of the day because it was all flat. So those are some of the things that we concentrated on. And then, once a lot of the air compressors went away, a lot of people switched over instead to Guinness gas because that was all over the place. And so they went from a really bad situation to just a simply bad situation where, now they weren't making their beer taste terrible after a day. They were just making it go flat after like 4 or 5 days. And so there was a lot of work to be done to clean up a lot of that stuff too.
Why would Guinness, for consumers who don't know, what is Guinness gas? So
So Guinness is nitrogenated beer. and it behaves differently when you pour it on draft. If you've ever had one, that special cascade comes from the nitrogen that's infused in the beer, as opposed to CO2, which is in your standard beer. And to dispense that beer, you can't use regular CO2 or a CO2 rich blended gas like you would for a regularly carbonated beer, because it ruins that beer. So there's not much carbonation in it. So you use a very nitrogen rich gas to push it. And it's, while it's perfect for Guinness, that nitrogen rich gas will cause regularly carbonated beers to go flat. It lets all the gas escape from the beer. But Guinness is really popular, and it has been for a long time. And so that gas is pretty common. And for long draw systems that require, I'm trying not to get too into the technical weeds here for your audience, but for long draw systems, you usually require some type of blended gas to achieve higher pressures on the keg without ruining the carbonation in the beer. And that blend is, for regularly carbonated beer, is usually around like 70% CO2. Guinness gas, on the other hand, what you need is something that's more along the lines of 25% CO2. So if you decide that you're going to use your Guinness gas to push everything on your long draw system, you can get the beer to pour, but all your regularly carbonated beers will go flat. So that's been a pretty common issue for a long time. It's gotten a lot better over the past probably 5+ years, but it's, again, that was one of those things that myself and a lot of people in the business, especially 15 years ago, 20 years ago, were working really hard to change.
I want to talk about infection.
Yeah.
Because I posed a question on Twitter of, who has a bad draft line story? And a lot of people spoke up, but I think everyone has a bad draft line story. When you go to a bar, I went to everyone has one. I went to a Giants game at MetLife Stadium. I ordered a Miller Lite, and it was disgusting. And I paid $11 for that Miller Lite, and I was very upset. So much so that I contacted Molson Coors, because I know people there, and they had the guy come out the next day to fix it.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I was like, hey, you. I want. And so now I only order bottles at stadiums, because stadiums, that's a whole other podcast to talk about stadium systems. But everyone has a bed. And I know in Connecticut, where I live, it is a legal requirement, and you have to clean your own draft lines. It's so weird with certain states in America, the distributor cleans their lines, or that's illegal. You have to do it. In Connecticut, we're required to clean them weekly. But no, I've never had anyone come and be like, show me your log. And every restaurant or brewery is required to keep a log of draft cleaning. Yes. And so if the state health inspector shows up and says, I want to see your draft cleaning log, can you talk a little bit about the importance of draft cleaning and why consumers should care? Because there's nothing worse than my family goes to our family pizza place in the town I used to grow up in, and the system is, I want to go back there and be like, can I look at your kegerator? Because it tastes, that Stella is something special, something.
Yeah. Well, your story there at the stadium and at your hometown pizza joint or whatever, those are perfect examples of why draft line cleaning is important and why this is an important topic. Stuff grows in beer. Beer has lots of food for microorganisms, and these microorganisms that really are kind of all over the place and very common in daily life, that we don't really notice because we don't see them or whatever, but they're all over the place. They get into draft systems, they get into draft lines, typically through the coupler, where the device taps onto the keg, and they feed on carbohydrates in beer and multiply. And certain types of microorganisms, when they reach a certain critical mass, they will start to produce compounds that you can detect and can make your beer taste bad. So there's one called lactobacillus. It's a bacteria that's all over the place, and it gets into draft lines. And when it multiplies in a biofilm on the inside of the draft line, it produces lactic acid, which makes your beer taste sour. There's also another one called Pediococcus, which does the same thing, and it produces lactic acid, but it also produces diacetyl, which tastes like butter or like movie theater buttered popcorn. And those things are gross when you're tasting them in your draft beer. And so this is a natural thing. I don't want to scare anybody. This happens. It's a naturally occurring thing. There's nothing in beer. There's nothing that grows in beer in a draft line that's going to make you sick. It's just going to make your beer taste bad. And, these things are easily controlled by simply cleaning the draft lines. And that just involves flushing a chemical solution through the draft line every 2 weeks and flushing out that biofilm. And so if that line cleaning is being done regularly and the right way, then these issues will never pop up. But unfortunately, it doesn't always get done the right way. And, a lot of it is because it's a complicated system. Like you mentioned, different states have different laws about who can clean draft lines and who can't. In the majority of states, beer distributors have that responsibility, or they take on that responsibility. But there's about 15 states where it's illegal for distributors to clean draft lines. And so, it's considered inducement to purchase alcoholic beverages, which we all know is incredibly evil. And so, that duty, it falls upon the retailers. And most people who work in the business or the on-premise business know that retailers don't know anything about draft systems for the most part. And so, learning about line cleaning and understanding the importance of it is, sometimes lost in the shuffle. So, it's a complicated system, and it's different depending on what state you're in. Some states have some regulations, like you suggest in Connecticut. Illinois has some similar regulations, but most states don't. And so, there's very little guidance out there about, how you should be doing it, or when you should be doing it. That's one of our goals with the draft quality group, with the Brewers Association, is to kind of get that information out there. But it's a critical thing because, especially now with, when you look at trends in, what beer is doing right now, and, beer overall as a category is struggling. Craft beer overall as a category is struggling. Sales aren't what they used to be. And, draft beer remains a great sampling opportunity that drives beer sales overall. And if you're screwing up that first encounter someone has with a beer, then, that hurts beer overall. And so, the more I see sales numbers and trend numbers in beer, the more I think, man, draft quality is more important than ever. We've got to make sure that people's first sampling experience with a certain beer is going to be a good one.
And the draft beer quality manual is that you can buy it like a hard copy, but it's available for free, right? As a PDF.
If you go to the Brewers Association website, you can search for draft beer quality manual. You can search for it online. It'll take you there. You can download a PDF for free. That's right. So, it's a free resource to anybody who wants it. And you can buy a hard copy. I think might be like 10 or 12 bucks or something like that. It's pretty cheap, and it's a technical manual. So, we go into basically everything that is important for maintaining the quality of beer at a bar, restaurant, or brewery tap room. Everything from equipment selection for a draft system to system design and installation and draft line cleaning. We have step-by-step instructions, basically SOPs on how to clean draft lines, with how to clean them a couple different ways depending on the methodology that you're using. And we go into all the details that you need. If you have that book, you will be able to learn how to clean your draft lines appropriately.
I would encourage people, consumers, to read it as well. I mean, there's certain aspects parts of that maybe they can skim over, but I like, as a consumer, I personally like knowing the hows and whys of things, and I think it helps the consumer to understand this, so that when they're sitting at the bar, they can kind of understand what's going on and ask the right questions. Like if something is tasting off, they'll kind of know what questions to ask of the bartender or manager.
The
So I would encourage lots of
troubleshooting
people.
section is really good.
Yeah, and there's also, I should mention, some years ago we did produce a bit of a condensed, kind of easier to digest version of it, specifically for retailers. It's called, as you might imagine, Draft Beer Quality for Retailers. And so, we realized that, it being a technical manual that, has grown in scope quite a bit over the years. It's not the easiest thing for a retailer who oftentimes is too busy or is very busy and, maybe doesn't have time to sift through a whole manual like that. It was designed for them to be able to get to the topics that matter most to them. So, a lot of the line cleaning stuff is addressed in there in condensed form and is laid out in a way that's maybe easier to digest for somebody who, doesn't have all the time to sift through a highly technical manual.
And
So
draft
that-
cleaning isn't
that
like
might be
that
something.
difficult. It can be with long draws when you get into dynamic cleaning and you have pumps and stuff. But
Mhm.
once you know that and how to work it, it's quite fun to watch someone actually clean the lines, because it's very colorful when you have, because the caustic is blue, which we were talking about before the show, where it was a requirement to make it blue so you didn't poison someone. Like they did in, was it Vegas or Florida or
Yeah, there's
wherever?
been several examples of several instances, unfortunately, of people accidentally drinking draft line cleaner that was left in a line. And it's a nasty chemical and it really messes people up. It, puts them in the hospital and, people have gotten injured pretty severely in the few instances where that's happened. And yeah, we were talking beforehand about an instance in Florida, probably 20 years ago or more, where somebody drank some and it hurt them pretty bad, and they sued the bar, they sued the bartender, they sued the line cleaning company. I think it was a distributor that had cleaned it. They sued the distributor. They just sued the manufacturer of the chemical, like basically everybody involved. And they won a decent amount of money from what I recollect. And after that, the line cleaning chemical manufacturers started to put a dye into the chemical. So if you get a glass, if you have clear chemical and you are pouring somebody like a Mick Ultra or a Coors Light, and somebody puts it in front of you and you're not thinking too much, you might take a sip before you realize, hey, this is a little clearer than my normally pretty clear beer. But if they put a glass of blue liquid in front of you, you might be a little more hesitant to take a swig out of it.
It's the new Zima.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Do you have any advice for consumers? Like, I'm trying to imagine, and I'm not trying to defend anybody here, but I'm trying to imagine if I had sipped a beer that had cleaner in it, I imagine I would taste it. And so whether I'm tasting cleaner
You would
or I'm
feel
tasting,
it.
Yeah, and or I'm tasting lactic acid or diacetyl. Like, what would you advise consumers to do?
If they what would I advise them to do in the case of sampling something like that, drinking line
Yeah,
cleaning solution?
Well, drinking line clean solution, they'd probably be in the hospital.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty, if you're drinking line cleaning solution, that's a very serious issue. And not only the bar, but whoever cleaned the lines, if it was the retailer, oftentimes it's a distributor, everybody kind of needs to be brought into that, because that's a potential, it's a liability situation
yeah.
there. That's more often than not, there's legal action being taken there because people get seriously injured there. And if you drink line cleaning solution, you're going to know it right away. I mean,
yeah.
I've not done it, but my guess is that it burns really, really bad because it's caustic solution.
Yeah.
And it eats organic material. So in this case, it would be basically like dissolving your esophagus, which is pretty bad. And it probably hurts pretty bad. If you're drinking beer that tastes bad, like if you go to drink your favorite Pilsner beer and it tastes like buttered popcorn, or it's sour, that, first of all, you have every right to send it back. And second of all, you should be alerting the bartender or somebody, or maybe even a manager at the restaurant, to the fact that the beer isn't tasting good and it's showing signs of the lines not being cleaned. I mentioned before that retailers oftentimes don't know much about draft beer systems and their draft beer. And it's not so much of an indictment of retailers as it is of the system, the way it's designed or the way it's set up here in the US. Retailers pay somebody to put their system in, when the same way they pay somebody to install their bar in their kitchen. And then once it's installed, somebody else comes in and maintains it. Somebody else cleans it. Somebody else fixes things when it breaks. And so they oftentimes don't know anything about it. And so they're very detached oftentimes from the quality of what's coming out of it too. A lot of retailers, just see it as this kind of, machine that makes them money by selling beer and dispensing their beer. And there's oftentimes a disconnect between what's actually the quality of the beer and the awareness of the manager or the owner. So they might have really terrible beer coming out of the taps, and the lines may have only been cleaned once every like 6 or 8 weeks, and they might not have any idea if they're not drinking it themselves. And so they should know about it. So yeah, I mean, if you get a really bad beer, I would say something about it, and let them know, especially if you recognize that is specifically something related to line cleaning, then you can let them know that, and that's information that they can use.
And they may or may not care. And then I guess if they don't care, you vote
Well,
with
you
your dollars and
you
go
take your
somewhere
business,
else.
take your business elsewhere.
I'm just thinking of
occasionally, in years of working with retailers, I would sometimes run across retailers that had serious issues, and I would tell them, and their response would be, "Well, nobody's ever complained about it."
Right.
Well, I'm letting you know now, and you can either ignore this at your own peril, I suppose.
Yeah. How do you have a sense of how? Let's talk about, let's forget about stadiums and arenas, but like in terms of tap rooms and beer bars, how prevalent is it that, like, as if I'm a beer lover and I'm going to a tap room or a bar, what is the probability I'm going to get bad beer? Do you have a sense of how prevalent bad beer lines are? It's 10%, 30%.
I think this is going to vary quite a bit with where you live, and what you're drinking. And I say that because of the varying laws, right? Some you know, some states, some states where distributors clean lines, you might be in a city where all the distributors do a really great job, or you might be in a city where the distributors clean lines and like 2 of the 4 big distributors do a good job and the other 2 don't, right? So that's
Right.
going to depend
Right.
on what you get. But in my opinion, it's fairly prevalent that you're going to get some type of quality issue, and this is including both line cleaning and system design issues and date code issues, because that's the other thing we didn't really mention is beer being a perishable product, and as it gets older it starts to show signs of age. You get the kind of sherry like characteristics, papery cardboardy, honey like, rich caramel toffee characteristics in some beers. That's really common too. And so when you add all that up, I don't know if I'm in a position to put a percentage on that, but I encounter it quite a bit. But at the same time, I mean, for a long time, it was my job to go out and have beer at retail specifically to look for these things.
Right.
So, I may have a little bit of a skewed perception of it, but it's
no, the reason I asked the
prevalent.
question is I want consumers to feel comfortable that if I think a lot of people are like taking wine, for example. I think a lot of people are hesitant to send a bottle of wine back if they feel it's been, it's not quite right. And I want consumers to know that this actually is a problem. And if you're tasting something that doesn't taste right, send it back. Don't feel like, oh, it's probably fine. I probably don't know what I'm talking about. No, like you're probably right. It probably doesn't taste good. Send it back.
Yeah. And chances are, if you're in a position where you're thinking about it, there's probably somebody else who's sent their beer back in within, the previous couple of days, if not sooner. You're probably not the only one.
Neil, do you have any like tips or tricks for consumers? So like one of mine is when I go to a bar and I've never been there before and I'm not sure about their draft system, I'll ask for a sample of like, even if I've had this like IPA a million times. I mean, the bartender doesn't know that. And so I can kind of sip before I'm like, oh, okay, it's clean. We can go in and order it. Do you do something like that, or do you just kind of go all in, or do you have any other things that you do before you order beer?
One of the things that I do is if I'm close to the taps and I can get a look at them, if you can see the faucets, there's some subtle but still pretty distinctive signs that the faucets haven't really been cleaned. So when you look at the faucet, the front side of the faucet or around the spout, or like at the base of the handle, like there's that little kind of round circle on the very front of the faucet. That's kind of the end of the plunger. There, you might see like dried beer around that, or like some kind of, gummy stuff, or even like some kind of moldy stuff around the faucet. Faucets that haven't been cleaned in a while oftentimes will have outward signs of, it'll just look dirty. Dried beer, maybe even some mold on it. So that's a pretty good sign. That's one of the things I'll look for. That's not a bad idea what you're saying, to get a little sample of it too, just to see. The first, that's one of the things that I would do if I was looking for issues of beer, is I would try and get the first beer of the day out of there. So, what happens sometimes is the beer that's been sitting in the line overnight has been sitting in contact with all that biofilm and kind of absorbing all of those flavors that we discussed before. And so the first pour of the day on a dirty draft line is going to be full of all that, sour flavor or buttery or whatever it might be. And it oftentimes happens where you'll get it all in that first beer. But then the second beer that you pour has been in the keg and hasn't been in contact with the line as long, and may not exhibit it as strongly, and maybe not exhibit it at all unless it's been sitting in contact with the line for a little bit of time. So that first pour of the day can be really critical and really telling overall.
Sounds disgusting.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, getting a sample to start can help out quite a bit.
When it's the distributor who is cleaning the lines, would it be typical that the distributor cleans all of the lines in a bar, or would they only clean the lines that their beers are on? And the reason I ask is that if I have a beer at a bar and it tastes great, can I assume that all of the other lines are being cleaned properly, or is that a bad assumption?
Yeah, that's a good question. The distributor is typically going to come in and clean just their lines. So you might, if you've got 4 beer distributors that sell beer to an account, they're going to have 4 different line cleaners come in on their own schedule and clean their own beer lines. So one might be kept in great shape, but the one next to it might not be. And this gets more complicated with these heavy rotating tap bars. So you might have a place that's got 30 beer lines and they're constantly rotating different beers out. And so what happens sometimes, you might have a given draft line that, when distributor A comes in, tap line number 1 doesn't belong to them, so they don't clean it. And so then after they leave, the retailer switches it. So, it used to belong to, distributor B, but then after distributor A leaves, they change it over to a different brand, and now it does belong to distributor A, but they just left. And so distributor B comes in and, it doesn't belong to them anymore. And so you can see how putting different beers on from different distributors on the same line could cause certain lines to just kind of fall through the cracks, because these different distributors come in and it never belongs to the distributor that's in there at the time when they're cleaning their lines. So I encourage retailers, and I've worked with retailers on developing systems to be able to track their own line cleaning, even if distributors are doing that line cleaning, so they can make sure that certain lines aren't falling through the cracks and just simply not getting cleaned.
Right. Seems like such a pain in the ass.
Yeah,
a huge headache or I guess in Connecticut, distributors can't. It's illegal, because then you're beholden to, all right, I got to keep this distributor's beer on, so they'll clean it. And I can kind of see where in Connecticut it's your own, but then you're on your own and you got to find someone to clean it, or you have to have. When I lived in Oregon, I cleaned the lines at the bar I worked at every 2 weeks. It was part of my clock in. It took 2 hours, and
that's great, because those are the bars where you're more likely to find the best quality, is where the retailer just takes it on themselves. Yep. They're either in a state where distributors can't do it, and they go ahead and take it on themselves, and they don't farm it out to anybody else. They just do it themselves and they care about it. Or they, some of these places, Missouri, where I live, is a distributor clean state. Distributors clean the lines around here, but there's a handful of bars and restaurants that don't like the unreliability of it, and they have purchased the equipment on their own, and they clean their own draft lines. They're invested in their system. They're aware of what's happening with it. They know how to fix simple issues with it. They clean their own lines, and their beer is, that's a place where I'd be willing to go drink draft beer.
Yeah. There was I can't remember, maybe it was you who told me, there is a bar that they actually have a sign at the bar. It says, "We last cleaned our lines on such and such a date."
Oh, I think there's a bar near my house that does that. And it's really, you're like, oh, because it also is customer facing, and because like, who thinks about, if you're a casual beer drinker, I would never think about draft cleaning, I guess, until
Yeah.
I had a beer that was bad, or I would have a beer and I would blame the brewery.
Right.
Yeah.
I had when I lived in Oregon, our New Belgium rep that would come in had like a cleaning tool, and he would jam it in the faucet and swirl the faucet around. And if it came back with any material, that you can't sell our beer.
Yep.
For all of Oregon. And so you always knew when you were getting a New Belgium product at any bar in Oregon that it was going to taste good. And it was a great thing that the sales rep did. Like he was, making sure that the beer was good. And it always was. Every time I had a New Belgium, it was always excellent.
Yeah. Yeah. They've always done a great job with draft beer quality. They continue to have a very robust draft quality department. Matt Meadows has headed that up for many years, and he's a friend and colleague of mine. They do a fantastic job, and they've always held their distributors to a higher standard than just about anybody else. And that's that tool sticking up in there is really it was probably just a bar napkin.
I think it was a straw. It was just a plastic straw.
You can use a little stir straw as well. And that's just, one step in a basic cleanliness audit of a system. When I was at Boulevard, I've had all our sales crew doing a certain number of audits per week at retail, and forms that they would fill out. And they had, a multi-step procedure they would go through to audit cleanliness at retail, and identify problems with the system before they started affecting the flavor of the beer.
It's so important. Like it's it's so important. There's nothing worse than when you get an infected beer.
I agree. I've heard it said so many times that the best beer is draft beer as opposed to bottle or canned beer, but that is only true if it's dispensed properly, right? So
yeah, it can really be it can be one of the closest representations of what the brewer intended, but it does require a little bit more care and feeding.
It's so important. And once you have it, which unfortunately I bet everyone has, and once you know how to spot it, you can be a better drinker. And go to the college dive bar down my street from my house has impeccable draft lines. They take really good care of, or at least it tastes like they take really good care of it. And so we go there a lot because I know when I go there, I'm going to have a really good beer. And that's the most important part.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'm the same way. I've got places where I know that I'm okay drinking draft beer, and there's other places where I'm probably
gonna order bottles.
Not gonna do it.
If I see the majority of the bar, if I go to a bar and the majority of people are drinking bottles, I go, don't drink the draft lines, you will regret it. Yep, bottles only. So
yeah, these subtle cues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Neil, thank you so much. Do you have anything else to add? How can people reach you if they want to get a hold of you to say, hey, put in my new fancy draft system, or hey, I got a draft question for you?
Yeah, so they can reach out to me. The best way is you can go to my website. It's sellgreatbeer.com. That's SELLGREATBEER. Sellgreatbeer.com has got information about my business and consulting and the draft system installation. I would refer you to my social media, but my favorite medium got taken over by a terrible person, so I pretty much abandoned it. So I'm not really super present on social media right now. Or you can email me at that same address, Neil, Neil, at sellgreatbeer.com.
Nice. Don,
Awesome.
Did you have any more questions for Neil?
Nope. I learned a lot. I enjoyed this quite a bit. So thank you, Neil.
It's super important. Thanks for all you do, Neil, because the draft beer quality manual and making sure people are drinking great beer, you do it really well. So thank you.
I appreciate it.
Not all heroes wear capes.
Yeah.
As they say.
Thanks, guys. This has been fun.
All right. Thanks, Neil.
Mhm.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So, John, what did you learn today about draft beer? Do you feel like you're a better consumer?
I feel like I'm a better consumer. I don't. I'm always hesitant to send beer back. I think I'm gonna do. I want to be better at that.
I'm not.
I liked the tip about looking at the faucets. That's
a
something
really
Yep.
super good, super. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. And then you know me, I'm an Uber geek. I liked learning that where does that diacetyl flavor come from? It's from pediococcus. So I did not know that. So how about you, Em? What'd you like about that?
I just really enjoy listening to Neil like geek out a little. I also really enjoy talking about what people can do about getting bad beer, sending it back. It's really fascinating to discover how much distributors play a role in draft cleaning. I don't have that in my state. So, and every state that I've lived in, I've always cleaned the draft lines at places I've worked. And it's something that I've always taken a lot of pride in. But for the majority of people, it seems incredibly difficult to rely. I would be very frustrated to have to rely on a distributor for certain lines. And then what about, other line? Like that's the fact that they only clean their lines. And with the amount of things changing all the time, what if they clean a line and then for 6 weeks or so, no one cleans that line because it's got something else on it, or you keep switching and you're just not thinking about it. I mean, it can be a real detriment to your business.
As Neil was describing that, I was thinking, well, why doesn't the bar just take that on themselves? And then you said, well, you used to do it and it takes you 2 hours. I didn't realize it was that intensive.
So for draft cleaning, you can do dynamic cleaning, which is hooking up to an electric pump and then you let it flow. Yeah, you have to take everything apart. You have to individually scrub every faucet. You have to soak everything in solution. I worked in a bar that only had 18 taps, so we used a static cleaning, which is it's a pot where you kind of push everything in and then let it sit and soak. It doesn't constantly move. And it has to sit for at least 20 minutes in the solution. And then you have to flush everything with water. And then at the end, you have to make sure that the pH is 7. So it's neutral like water. And then you have to hook everything back up. And then certain times you have to, take apart all the coupler. I mean, it's incredibly involved. I would get to the bar before we'd open and spend my whole morning there cleaning. And it was, I took it very seriously.
Yeah.
And so if you're, if you don't think that it's an important part of your job, that's 3
You're
main
in the
hours.
wrong job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's something that's incredibly important. And I actually really enjoyed it because I like getting my hands dirty and, making sure everything, you have a set list and there's chemicals. It's fun, but it is a lot of work. And then making sure you put everything back and there's tools. I mean, it's a hassle, but it's a needed hassle that should be done and needed to be done. So a lot of places will hire draft cleaning companies to clean the lines for people. And that's their only job. So they can focus wholly on it versus other things. So,
and I, as a consumer, I was unaware. I was aware of the importance of it, but I was not aware of the intensity of it. And so now I can appreciate that better. I mean, it's easy to harsh on the bars that don't do it well, but now I want to switch mindset and appreciate the bars that do it well.
Absolutely, because once you have good beer and you know where to get good beer, you've made a customer for life. And you know that beer is always going to taste good when you go there. And so it's always good to, when you go to a place that really cares about their beer and the people who work there really care about the beer. I mean, I'm going to keep going there. And so the draft quality is just a part of it, but it's a very, very important part.
Yeah, agreed.
So visit allaboutbeer.com and follow us on social media at allaboutbeer. You can also throw us a few bucks if you like this show and others at patreon.com/allaboutbeer to support this show. We'll be back in a couple weeks with a brand new show. And if you have any questions or have a show idea, you can email the experts at podcast@allaboutbeer. That's also the email for feedback, suggestions, and inquire about advertising, because we're always looking for advertisers to help pay for this show. Before we go, Don, how can they reach you?
At social media, I am at the Dawn of Beer I also really like talking about beer. So if you want to drop me an email, you can do that. I'm don@thedawnofbeer.com. And yourself, Em?
And I'm M. Sauter, so at Pints and Panels across all social media channels, and my website is www.pintsandpanels.com. This show is produced by All About Beer. Visit allaboutbeer.com for articles, notes on the show and others, and to connect via the newsletter and social media. See you next time. Cheers!
Cheers!